Avatar: The Last Airbender is often regarded as one of the best shows ever made. If you just look at IMDb, you'll see that the show has a score of 9.3, making it the 7th highest rated show on the platform. Its final episode even has a score of 9.9. Undeniably, Avatar: The Last Airbender has received a very warm response. However, for some reason, I had never watched Avatar: The Last Airbender fully until recently. I think it's probably because the show was just before my time. In fact, when I was growing up, I heard people talk more about The Legend of Korra, which is a show that I also still haven't seen. Funnily enough, I had watched the live action Last Airbender film when I was younger, and like most people, I wasn't a huge fan of that film, and I think I kind of just wrote off the series as a whole after that. However, with the new live action series, which should be out by the time this video is released, I thought why not jump into the original series and see whether it's as good as people say. And I'm glad I did, because in my opinion, Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the greats. Despite its high acclaim and my upcoming glowing praise, I don't think Avatar: The Last Airbender is perfect. In fact, I had tried to watch the show once before and I dropped it after watching 4 episodes, and that was because, for starters, I think the show has a very weak beginning. After perusing the internet, I found that I'm not alone in feeling this way, although no one seems to agree on when the show gets good. Some people obviously love it from the start, some people say it's halfway through season 1, some people say that it's the end of the first season, others say that you have to wait for season 2, and then you have people like me that say the show gets good when they introduce Toph, but I'll talk a lot more about her later. So why didn't I love the series instantly? Well, there are a few reasons. Some of these issues disappear as the show progresses, but others do remain. The first issue I had was the pacing. Now this is an issue that I think continues throughout the entire series, but it is at its worst at the start of the show. For me, the pacing of this show was just a little too quick at times, as if the show was rushing through some of the more boring moments so that we could get to the exciting action sequences or character moments. It meant that certain scenes felt like they were brushed to the side, or that there were things that the show didn't address that I wish they did. For example, I wish we got to see more of Sokka and Katara's relationship with their grandmother, and they leave their water tribe a little too hastily in my opinion. And then there's also everything with Zuko's mom, which isn't resolved by the end of the series. The pacing definitely improves as the show progressed, but in the earlier episodes, it really felt like the show wasn't able to sit still and could only deal with one location for an episode before quickly leaving that location at the end of the episode so that we could move on to the next location for the next episode. I also think that some of the dialogue at the start of the show could be a bit weak too. I don't know if it's because the writers needed time to fully realise who these characters were, or if it's because this is a show aimed at kids, but some of the dialogue stuck out to me. It lacked subtlety and sometimes felt like it was making sure that there was no room for misinterpretation. I do think it's most likely because this is a kids show, no matter how good it is, and they had to write dialogue that even the youngest of children would easily grasp. So it's an issue that I think most people will easily overlook, and I do think that the dialogue improves as the seasons progress too. Lastly, there are some sound effects that I found distracting. They're usually there to enhance the comedy of a scene, but they usually fell flat with me. I know that a lot of people might look at these criticisms and say that it's a kids show, what do you expect? But I would respond to that by saying that there are plenty of things that are specifically aimed at children that don't have these issues. I mean, look at the Spider-Verse films. Immaculate pacing, wonderful dialogue, and no, in my opinion, out of place sound effects. And yet those films are still able to be really funny and silly whilst telling a captivating story, and they're not alone in that regard. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a fantastic show, but I think it would be unfair of me to pretend it's perfect, or at the very least that I had no issues with it, especially considering how highly acclaimed it is. That said, that's pretty much the extent of my issues with this show, and whilst it did take some time, I did fall in love with this show and miss it dearly now that my time with it is over. Now the negatives are out the way, let's talk the positives. Firstly, the animation has aged really well. The only aspect of the animation that hasn't aged the best is the show's occasional use of CGI. It's not the worst CGI I've ever seen, and I do feel like the show used it only when they absolutely had to. There's no CGI creatures in the show, only CGI tanks and warships. And sometimes I actually feel like the CGI enhanced the scenes. I'm specifically talking about those warships in the final episodes of the show, but the 2D animation in this show looks incredible, even after all these years. I watch a lot of anime, and this show still looks better than a lot of anime released nowadays. The characters are expressive and fluid, allowing you to really connect with them and understand their thoughts and feelings. The action sequences are engaging and creative. This show has some of the most unique fight scenes that I've ever seen, and you can clearly tell that a lot of thought was put into how the characters' powers work, and also how the characters could use those powers in interesting ways. There were genuinely so many moments in this show where a character would use their ability, and I'd just sit there dumbfounded going, how did anyone ever think of that? It's no surprise that this show has had such a long-lasting legacy, with action sequences as memorable as these. This creativity and cleverness even extends to the show's story. Firstly, this show has fantastic world building. The 4 nations all feel distinct, and I like that even within the 4 nations, there are subdivides and special groups, like those stoners at the swamp. This is a world that feels lived in and alive, where there are cultures and customs different to our own. It makes every new place that the gang visit exciting and interesting because you're never quite sure what to expect. I honestly haven't been this invested in a fictional setting since Star Wars, and that is very high praise. Luckily, the story is just as good. There are 4 nations, the 4 elements: earth, air, fire and water. One day the fire nation attacks, and only the Avatar, the master of all 4 elements, can beat them. However, the Avatar has gone missing, and for the next 100 years, the Fire Nation are able to do as they please. This means that when Aang returns to the world, he's already at a disadvantage. We then watch as Aang trains to master the 4 elements and defeat Fire Lord Ozai. It's a very simple story, but this show is more about the journey than the inevitable destination. Like the locations, the people at these places are just as interesting to learn about, and they are given as much care and thought as this show's world is. Avatar The Last Airbender is a simple story told as effectively as it can be, and a lot of that effectiveness comes down to Avatar's greatest strength: its characters. Now for this part of the video I may discuss some spoilers, so here's your spoiler warning here. I think Avatar The Last Airbender's lasting legacy is primarily due to its characters. Again, I've not seen The Legend of Korra, so I don't know how its characters compare, but I will say that outside of Korra, I haven't heard of a single character from that show. In comparison, Avatar's characters still get spoken about today, and you hear of them even if you haven't watched the show. Let's start with our protagonist, Aang. Aang is the perfect lead for this show. He is the driving force of the plot, and since he wants to avoid his responsibilities as much as possible, he's the character leading us to these different corners of Avatar's world. He's reckless and immature and wants to have as much fun as possible. Being the Avatar is a fate he seems to almost despise. He didn't ask to be the Avatar, and he didn't ask to be the Avatar during one of the most difficult times in the world's history. It's a lot to put on someone's shoulders, especially that of the kids. However, Aang also has a strong moral compass and a good grasp of ethics that were passed down to him by the monks that he lived with. It's not just being the Avatar that he has issues with, but what the Avatar is expected to do in this war too. Fire Lord Ozai is evil. That is unquestionable, and if I'm being honest, he's a little one note too. This show has great characters, but its big bad certainly isn't one of them. But regardless, Ozai is a bad man, but he's undeniably powerful too, arguably too powerful to be left alive, which is why everyone wants Aang to kill him, since Aang is the only one capable of doing so. However, that doesn't sit right with Aang, as Aang follows the school of Batman, where maiming, beating and severely wounding is fine, but killing is a step too far. In all seriousness, this is very in keeping with who Aang is. He's never wanted the responsibility or pressure of being the Avatar, so it shouldn't be surprising that he doesn't want to be responsible for ending someone's life, no matter how much they deserve death. Aang is the best personification of this show. He can be extremely silly and even downright stupid, but he can be unexpectedly serious too. Just like how this show progressed and got better, so too did Aang, and his character growth was one of the best parts of this show, although I do wish we got to see more of him mastering the elements, since it never really felt like he did to me.
Momo, no! You've killed us all!
No, he hasn't.
Oh, right. Bending.
Then there's Sokka. Sokka. My favourite character in the first season. What I like about Sokka is that he starts out a very flawed individual. He's very sexist, but it makes a lot of sense for him to be too. He grows up in a village where all the men have left to go to war, leaving him to be the man of the village to protect the women and children, something that he takes very seriously. However, it's also skewed his views on what men and women should be. He hasn't had men around to actually teach him how to behave, and sadly his mum was around to teach him about how a woman can be. Also, there are no warrior women in the village to challenge his views, and the only person who does challenge him is his sister, and let's be real, whoever listens to what their siblings say. However, Sokka is able to reflect on himself, and the more of the world that Aang shows him, the more Sokka realises how flawed his beliefs on gender are. However, what I also like is that while Sokka gets rightfully humbled, the show doesn't turn him into a complete joke. Yes, Sokka is responsible for a lot of the comedy and silly moments in the show, but he's also able to shine and prove himself as a true warrior. Even in the episode where he gets humbled by a Kyoshi warrior, he's actually able to knock her down after that too. It makes both characters feel more real, and it makes the blossoming romance between Sokka and Suki easier to root for, as neither of them dominate the relationship. I also like that the show touches on Sokka's inferiority complex every now and then. He feels inferior because he isn't a bender like the rest of the group, so feels like he has less to offer. Especially when it comes to Aang, as he literally can't train him. However, Sokka makes up for his lack of bending with his intelligence. I know, I'm as surprised as you are that someone as stupid as Sokka can be so smart too. However, Sokka's intelligence and constant planning leads to the next aspect of his inferiority complex. First, he feels inferior as a member of the group, but then he feels inferior as a warrior and a leader, feeling as if he can't measure up to his dad and his people. His big moment where he's telling everyone his plan, he messes up and his dad has to step in. A core aspect of Sokka's character is his desire to prove himself. It even connects to his sexism at the start of the series. There he wanted to prove that he was a real man, then he wanted to prove that he deserved to be on the Avatar team, and then he wanted to prove that he could be a real warrior and leader. Fortunately, by the end of the series, Sokka had proven each of these things. Sokka may have been a lovable goofball throughout the entire series, but he also harboured a lot of self-doubt. I'm glad that, whether he proved it to himself or not, Sokka was able to prove himself to everyone around him and the viewer that he was deserving of recognition. Plus, I liked him a lot more than Katara. In all honesty, Katara is my least favourite of the main characters in the show. However, don't mistake that for me saying that she's a bad character. No, instead it's a testament to how good all the other characters are in this series that I consider Katara to be my least favourite. Throughout most of the series, Katara is basically the mother of the group. She's always looking out for them and stopping them from doing stupid things. However, I like that the show recognises how young Katara is and has her do the occasionally dumb thing too. I think the third and final season of this show is when Katara really gets the chance to shine. She goes to her darkest point even using bloodbending, which always made me feel a bit weird for some reason. I'm not really a fan of blood, and thinking about someone controlling my insides is a horrible thought. And I'm glad the show recognises that it's a horrific power too. Katara even hates it, but has no qualms about using it when she goes to track down the man who killed her mum. It was interesting to see this side of the character, as she is usually more morally upright than even Aang. But even she's able to go off the deep end at times, and I like that the show highlights her character flaws and shows her personal growth. It isn't just Sokka who needs to improve in this show. Katara may not have had the same impact on me as the other characters in this show, but she is a really good character.
What are you doing here, Twinkle Toes?
However, there can only be one best character in the show, and that's easily Toph. As soon as she showed up in season 2, she easily took the favourite character spot away from Sokka for me. It's interesting because Toph is not what I expected. This isn't uncommon where I see an animated character and expect them to act a certain way due to their character design and what people tell me about them. The same thing happened when I saw Inuyasha for the first time. I expected him to be this real gentleman and very kind. Boy was I wrong. When I saw Toph for the first time, I fully expected the character to be this really shy, meek little girl who the rest of the group would constantly protect. Basically, I expected her to be like Hinata from Naruto. But boy was I wrong. Toph is the complete opposite of what I expected, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. She's loud but never obnoxious, sassy but not usually too mean, and is actually able to find a family that loves her for who she is, instead of the parents who did truly love her but never allowed her to be anything instead of the helpless blind girl. Toph is the best character purely because of her personality. She doesn't have the greatest character development, and she never goes on any life-changing adventures with Zuko, but that's because she doesn't really need to. The writers hit the jackpot when they were writing Toph because she's just genuinely fantastic. However, I do like that the show gives Toph some limitations. Sokka has no powers, Katara is pretty much teaching herself and Aang how to waterbend at the same time, and Aang never really fully masters the elements in this series. Toph, on the other hand, is the greatest earthbender to ever live. However, I like that whilst being blind was instrumental in her becoming the badass that she is, it does still hold her back. There are many moments in this series where Toph essentially becomes useless because she's either in the sky or she's in water. Toph can see through her feet, but that doesn't work when there's nothing for her feet to see. Toph is an extremely powerful character, one of the most powerful in the entire series, so I like that the writers found a way to organically prevent her character from becoming too powerful, whilst also acting as the explanation for why she's so strong in the first place. Also, when it comes to characters using their powers in inventive ways, Toph tops the list. From learning how to metal bend to wrapping herself in body armour, Toph would always use her abilities in inventive ways. I wish I had more to say about Toph because she's genuinely one of my favourite characters ever, but I guess Toph's greatness speaks for itself. Then there's Zuko. Toph may best him when it comes to my favourite character, but honestly, Zuko may just be the best character in this show. He definitely gets the best episodes and moments in this series. Zuko's inner turmoil is so fascinating to watch. He constantly contradicts himself and gets angry very easily. He's torn between being the man he thinks his father wants him to be and the man he truly is underneath all the anger and rage. I love his relationship with his uncle Iroh, who by the way is a fantastic character too. I love how wise and noble Iroh is. He's like if Santa was awesome and if Santa only gave tea as a present. The two of them have the best developed relationship in this series. There was only one moment whilst I was watching Avatar The Last Airbender where I got a little emotional, and it was the episode where Zuko and Iroh reunite after leaving on bad terms at the end of season 2. It's just such a magnificent scene and very cathartic too. I loved watching Zuko go from this angry little ball of fire to an actual member of Team Avatar. If anything, I wish he joined the team sooner. I would have liked to have seen more of him interacting with the gang. Zuko was always a good man, but he was led astray by his upbringing, but fortunately through his uncle's teaching and his own self-reflection, Zuko was able to see the light and be the man he was always meant to be. He's an incredible character with an incredible character journey. I said before that season 2 was when I truly started to love this series, and whilst a lot of that is to do with Toph's introduction, it's also because we get introduced to an actually amazing villain, Azula. Ozai may have been a bit of a nothing burger in the character department, but Azula more than makes up for his disappointment, which is ironic when you think about their characters. Unlike Zuko, she's clearly been indoctrinated by her father's beliefs. She's a self-proclaimed monster who sees no issue with anything that the Fire Nation does, and even has no care for her own subjects. She's a bad person who actually relishes in being evil, and it makes her fun to watch. However, she isn't too one-dimensional. She does care about Ty Lee and May, and their betrayal of her send her spiralling into madness by the end of the show. When Team Avatar took on Zuko, it never really felt like there were any stakes, and you knew that they'd find a way out of any situation he presented them with. Azula on the other hand felt like an unstoppable force. She was cunning and dastardly. Zuko never truly felt like a villain to me in season 1, Azula more than made up for that. She was a fantastic character because we got to see her degrade over time and go from this extremely strong powerful enemy into this unhinged crazy demon. Whilst I am thrilled with the 3 seasons we got, part of me does wish that we got another season where we could see what happened to Azula and Ozai, and also whether Zuko found his mum, because I feel like with those 3 characters there was a lot more that could be said. But oh well, maybe some of it is addressed in The Legend of Korra, and if not there, then maybe it will be addressed in one of the 3 upcoming Avatar The Last Airbender films, which I am very excited about. Although I'm quite sad that apparently the original voice cast won't be returning for that film, because as well written as these characters are, the voice performances were just as instrumental in getting me to love these characters. I guess I just need to have faith that the creators of the show know what they are doing, and if they do recast for the film, they get voice actors that can properly inhabit these characters. Avatar The Last Airbender is a fantastic series. Its first season may not have hooked me right away, but its second season grabbed me and wouldn't let go. And its first season, especially the second half, is just magnificent. It tells an effective story with some of the most consistently excellent characters that I think I've ever come across. Their character designs and voice acting are some of the strongest and most memorable I've seen from a kids show. The animation is fantastic and its world building is almost second to none. Every episode builds on the last to create a magnificent whole. Whilst I don't think I would personally rate Avatar The Last Airbender as highly as it is on IMDb, at least compared to some of the shows beneath it, I do think it is a brilliant show and definitely one of the greats. Now that I've finished watching Avatar The Last Airbender, all I want to do is watch more Avatar The Last Airbender, and that's when you know you watched something truly special. But anyway, what do you think of Avatar The Last Airbender? Who's your favourite character in the show and why? Also, is The Legend of Korra good or bad? I do plan on watching it, but growing up a lot of people would only talk quite negatively about it, so I'd like to know what you think. Are you excited about the new Avatar The Last Airbender films? What do you think about them recasting the roles? Do you wish they would use the original voice actors? Have you seen the Last Airbender film by M. Night Shyamalan? What did you think of that? And have you watched the new live action series? How does that compare to the original show? Do you like it? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit the like button when you're down there. And if you're feeling especially generous, then do hit the subscribe button too. I'm hoping to hit 1000 subscribers before the end of 2024. I think it's very doable. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, I really appreciate it, and I do hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.